Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Creation Corner with your host David McNabb. So great to have you along today to view our show. And you know, you're on Prescott E-News, where we have all kinds of great news for you to check out, and I hope you'll do that. And tell your friends about the Prescott E-News so they'll be able to benefit as well from that. And you know, we're in new studios today. We just got furbished and opened up. So this is our first edition of the show in our new studio. So I'm so glad to have that going for us. It's bigger and better, you might say. Now, I always start the show off with a wee bit of humor. And I just want you to think about this one. What kind of lights did Noah have on the ark? Why, floodlights, of course. Come on, think about it, man. Or, you know, I was talking to my wife, well, arguing with my wife, I guess I should admit, the other day, and she says to me, and just where would you men be without us women? And I said to her, in the Garden of Eden, of course. Well, she didn't like that one so much either. And the argument continued, no doubt. Okay, now it's time for some recommendations. And I want to just tell you about a few organizations that I think are terrific, and I hope you'll check out. This one is called Issues in Education, and they give a free newsletter. So look this up, Google this, check it out, issueseneducation.org. And they have a wonderful program that's with that title, a half-hour Christian program that they do every week. And unfortunately, in the Prescott area, you're going to have to look that up on issueseneducation.org, but you can go and see their programs there because even though they have many shows across the country, many platforms and radio stations airing their show, the Christian station here in town does not do that at this point. Next one I want to mention to you is a creation ministry called Search for the Truth Ministries with Bruce Malone. So Google Search for the Truth. This is my favorite creation ministry. Why, you ask? Good question. Because this is the only ministry that reaches thousands upon thousands of students. They go to places like Fiji and the Cook Islands and Vanuatu, the Philippines. They get permission from the government to go and talk to the students directly and give them a beautiful hardbound all-color creation book that they have, and many of them cherish them as their only really nice possession, and read them over and over again, share them with their family, and it's just a wonderful ministry. There's been so much fruit come out of that one. Another big ministry, one of the big four, I call them, is Creation Ministries International out of Powder Springs, Georgia. They have lots of great resources that you can check on from them as well. Creation.com is their website. And this here is the Berean Call. Now, this is a little bit more obscure, but if you like to read about theology and the Bible, interpreting the Bible, how are we going to understand the Bible more correctly? This is a good resource for you. It's a free newsletter that you can get. They're out of Bend, Oregon. So you can call or you can look up Berean Call, contact them, and ask to get on their free mailing list. They'll send you this monthly. And let's see, we got another. Okay, these next three are going to be organizations that serve the persecuted Christians and families of martyred Christians around the world. Not Christian Science, mind you, but it's so important for Christians in America and in Western Europe that have the means to help these people who have nothing to do so. So this was called Open Doors. You can Google Open Doors and find a great organization that helps the persecuted Christians around the world. Here's another one called the Persecution Project. They also work on helping the persecuted Christians around the world. And the biggest one is called the Voice of the Martyrs. And they also have a free monthly magazine. This is it here. And they'll send that to you when you contact them and ask them to put you on their mailing list. This is their last thing. They also have at Christmas time, they put out a Gifts to Inspire, and you can get all kinds of great things here from Creation, from Voice of the Martyrs that they offer, and all their funds that they get go to help persecuted Christians around the world that need your help. And now I want to introduce our special guest for this issue, and her name is Willow Dressel, and she's from Chino Valley, and she's an author and a fossil expert, and she brought in some very cool fossils for us to look at today. So Willow, thank you for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, and tell us how you got, before you tell us how you got involved with fossils, tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, I have had a career as a wildlife biologist. I have a degree in wildlife biology and worked for the government for 15 years, then worked as a zookeeper in a couple of different places. And during the latter part of that is when I got interested in writing, because I had by then become a Christian. I did not grow up as a Christian. And being a wildlife biologist for the government, I realized that things were not matching. And somebody introduced me to creation science, and I just ate that up. I thought that was the truth shining so brightly. How could anybody miss it?
Finally, things made sense.
Finally, things made sense.
Yes.
It all came together. And then God laid it on my heart to involve creation science into a entertaining way of people learning about it. And therefore, I started writing historical Christian fiction, which includes creation science woven throughout it in an entertaining way.
Neat. And speaking about the creation fiction that you've done, you're author of 2 books, and your 3rd one's going to be coming out when?
I hope by springtime. Early springtime is what my aim is, yeah.
Early next year.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And tell us about the 2 that you're up.
Okay, so the first of the trilogy is called Of One Tongue, and it takes place around the time of the Tower of Babel. In this book, it shows about what life may have been like in the antediluvian era before the flood.
Explain antediluvian, because everyone doesn't know that term.
Sorry. Antediluvian just means before the flood. So we had a global flood, and that was brought on because of man's incredible sin. And God had, the Bible tells us that God had had enough of that. And therefore, other than Noah and his 3 sons and their wives, he flooded the earth. And everything, every mountain that was there, every high hills were under the water. And therefore, everything that was on those lands was died in the flood.
Yes, right. So only the animals and the people on the ark were spared.
That is correct, yes. And God even tells us in the Bible that He breaketh the head of the dragons under the sea. So He even tells us that there's going to be fossils.
Yes. And you brought lots of fossils, so we can start talking about that. How are fossils formed, and how come we have so many of them?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because the way fossils are formed has to happen very rapidly. If it's not done rapidly, then you have scavengers that'll take the body and tear it apart. And even if they're not there, the body's going to rot. It's going to have microbes coming in there and worms, and eventually even the bones will break down and there will be nothing left. So without a rapid burial and a deep burial, because scavengers could dig up a body if it's not deep, or erosion could expose it once again. So the deep and the rapid is very essential, and also it must be within a mineral or soil that's permeated with minerals. And then the pressure will cause the fossils to form. The pressure, and it could happen rapidly. It's not a matter of condition, or it's not a matter of time, it is a matter of condition. Fossils can form in as much as a few weeks to a few months under the right conditions, which would include the pressure, the mineralization, and even sometimes heat. So that is how fossils are formed, and there are 3 different types of fossils that we have. I think the most familiar people have heard about is the petrified fossils, which we hear about in the petrified forest. So petrification happens when you have the mineralization coming in and permeating the empty spaces. Then you have, if you could lift us up please, David, then you have what's known as cast fossils or the impression fossils. And if you look closely, you can see right here, these are probably the closest, and more here, they are impressions or footprints that were made by the animals that were trying to escape the flood, because we find these footprints always going uphill into sand dune, what would have been the sand dune areas. I have some pictures here. If you take a look at this one right here, you will see, sorry, it was upside down. You will see more impressions. These happen to be impressions of different types of dinosaurs. We have sauropod dinosaurs, and it looks like a young one. And if you note at the bottom, the very interesting thing about this picture is that you actually have bird impression fossils. And the thing I like to point out about this is that people like to try to make dinosaurs turn into birds, but we have birds and dinosaurs already together.
Yeah, that could put a crimp in that theory.
Yeah, it puts a little crimp in it.
And tell us how these impression fossils were formed, and how can we date them?
Well, we can date them with the strata, and I will get to that in just a moment, with the strata layers. But this type of fossils are formed when you have a mud or a soft sandstone, limestone type of inundation, and the animals are running across it or walking across it, just like when we walk across a mud type area, we leave footprints. And then it has to, again, be covered up pretty quickly. So usually what happens is you walk into soft stuff, it's a little bit, it dries a little bit, and then you have another layer of mud going over the top of it. And then, then that dries, and then you have another layer. And one of the ways that that can happen, I mean, the biggest way it happens, during the global flood, you have the whole world filling up with water, and now you have your tidal waves coming and sloshing, and so you're going to bring over the remaining areas of land that are left, you're going to bring in a wave of mud and soil and debris, and then that's going to go away, and then it's going to have a little time to dry out. Then you're going to have another slush bring another amount of mud coming, and because the rain kept coming, now there is the wave is going up a little higher, and then a little higher and a little higher, and then eventually you just get a lot of strata layers. And in that, I think I'm going to talk for just a minute about the KT boundary layer. The KT boundary layer is a dividing layer from where the fossils are found below it, and then above it where there is no fossils. It is a very important layer for a couple of reasons, because all the strata above it, if you can think of the Grand Canyon, or way back to when you were in school and you saw the geologic column in your textbooks, it's all these very nice strata layers. And if you look at it, you will see that there is no erosion, there is no fossilized animals, no fossilized plants, roots, anything in all of those layers. So David, they had to have been laid down rapidly, because if they were there, each layer was 1 million years. Don't you think there would be some erosion?
That sounds like strong evidence for flood to me.
I believe it does to me too.
Yeah.
And so the layers above the KT boundary layer would be the layers that were laid down pretty much after all the animals perished. And that's what we would expect to find if there was a global flood. Don't you agree, David?
Yes.
There would just be thousands and thousands of animals that were dead, and we would find the evidence of it.
Yes, and there's actually billions of these fossils around the world. I don't think it would be possible if there was not a global flood for there to be that many fossils, would there?
Certainly not in the same layers. Now, we do have local floods that will also produce fossils, but those occur above, way above the KT boundary layer, above all of those clean, neat strata layers. Then you start getting a little bit of fossils over here or fossils over there. And you can tell where the flood happened because there's an end to it. It's not like the KT boundary layer, which is continuous, even underneath the ocean. It goes and then it comes up on the other side.
Yeah. It's also curious how these impression creatures that we have are always going uphill.
Yes, it is.
Like they're trying to get away from the water that's
yes,
approaching.
it is. They're only going in one direction.
Boy, that's quite a coincidence.
That is. What could do that? What would make all the animals want to go uphill?
Yeah. And there's a lot of these impression fossils that are found in the Grand Canyon, too, all going uphill.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, the Grand Canyon is a wonderful place to come and look and see how the flood did a lot of damage and did a lot of left a lot of layers. So it's a wonderful place to come.
And most of these are reptiles, impression fossils, but most of the fossils we have are marine fossils, correct?
Yes.
Talk about that for a minute.
Okay, so marine fossils consist of anything from fish and whales and dolphins to any kind of seashells or mollusk, coral, or anything like that. So we have, here's bone from a fish. Here's some from a coral. And we tend to find the corals and bivalves. This is a bivalve. If you can see, it is from an oyster. And if you notice, it's in a closed position. That is a very important thing, because if you think about a clam bake, you take your live clams and you put them in a water, right? And you heat the water up and the water boils. And then when you're all done and you pull your clam out, what position is?
Just open up.
It's open up. Why?
Because those muscles are relaxed when they die.
That's right. And they open up and you can get to the meat real easy and it's yummy. But no, these are not that way. This is in the closed position. And there are millions, billions of fossils around, whoopsie, that are that way in the closed position as well.
And are these found in the valleys?
Oh yes, they're found in valleys.
But they're found where else?
They are also found on the top of mountains.
Yes.
As a matter
Very
of
high mountains.
Yes, the high mountains. As a matter of fact, Mount Kilimanjaro, not Mount Kilimanjaro, but the Himalayas. Actually, way at the top in limestone shelves, you can find ammonites. Ammonite is a type of squid, extinct squid, which would be similar to these. These are ammonites, okay? And you can find thousands, if not millions of them in these different shelves way at the top of the Himalayas, which is one of the highest mountain ranges that we have in the world.
Are those conical fossils right there as well that I'm seeing, or is this conical fossils?
No, these are straight, and these are Onyceruses. Onyceruses and ammonites are both a type of extinct squid.
Okay. There's this type of a fossil by the millions in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
There is. One of the reasons why evolutionists have said that things have evolved is because we tend to find more of the marine crustaceans, corals, ammonites, and things like that towards the bottom layers. And that is true. But if you think about it, what does logic tell you if there is a big flood coming, a mud flood coming, and then you have these these animals at the bottom of the ocean, what are they going to get covered up first, David, or are they going to run off?
Most definitely, because they can't run.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so we've got millions of these sea creatures that are found at the sea level, at the bottom of the sea,
Yeah.
and they're fossilized at the first level.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be older than the other fossils because they're at the first level.
Yeah.
Why are they at the first level?
Well, because if you think about it, if these huge, very long mudslides are coming from the global flood washing off of the land, the first things that are going to get covered are these things that dwell on the bottom of the oceans, the corals and the bivalves and the clams and
They don't run very fast.
they don't run at all.
Yeah.
So they would get covered first. So you have the majority of them there. However, because there's a lot of sloshing going on, you are also going to find other things mixed up in them. You will find fish bones in there. You will find turtle shells, fossilized turtle shells in there. Not as much as you do in higher layers because they were able to escape. Turtles can certainly swim a lot faster than a clam can, but still they would have been overcome by a lot of this. And then that's how you tend to get a lot of these different strata layers of different animals, and which suggested to those who wanted to believe in evolution that they could have evolved millions of years. However, one of the things that they don't tell you is that in these strata layers, you will find a mixture of fossils. You may have a majority of one, but then you're going to have a lot of the others. Even in the layers where you have the majority of dinosaur fossils, you're going to find your bivalves there. You're going to find some coral there. You're going to find turtle scutes, the parts of turtle shells and bones, and fish, and even marine mammals. You'll find those in there. Not to the degree that you find the dinosaur bones, but you'll find them in there, which tells you that there was a mixing of things. But in the different layers, of course, especially the marine dinosaurs, as this Mosasaurus jawbone shows you, that they can swim. They're gonna be in the higher layers, and then some of them even survive.
Is this a sea creature or a land creature?
This is a sea creature. This is a Mosasaurus. It's a marine dinosaur. Mm-hmm.
Okay, how big would this be?
Oh, they can get pretty big, 40 plus feet. Yeah.
40 feet
plus
or more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a big creature.
Yes, it is. Now, one of the things I also wanted to talk about, which is very good evidence, again, that the strata layers are not 1 million years old each, and that is called polystrate fossils. Polystrate fossils occur in a vertical direction, while the strata layers, of course, are in a horizontal layer. And they cross multiple layers, hence the word poly and straight over the strata. So they are going over multiple layers of strata. And because of that, it is not logical that a tree trunk would be able to be standing upright for 1 million of years in this strata, 1 million of years in this strata, 1 million in this, 1 million in that. Excuse me.
So most of these polystrate fossils are trees and traversing multiple layers of strata. And I've not seen any explanation from the evolution side to try to explain these things that make any sense whatsoever.
I have not. And Bill Nye asked, show me a fish that crosses layers and I'll believe in creation science. Bill Nye said that to Ken Ham in their debate. Well, there are whale fossils that cross strata like that, which is a polystrate fossil. And then, of course, you have most of your trees. And the reason why the trees look like they're standing upright is because as they are forming, and the root ball is heavier than the top, And so that is going to tend to upright the trees, and therefore we
Yes.
get them going across
Upside
these.
down.
Yeah.
Which makes it even harder to explain. I showed that to an evolutionist one time, and he said, "Oh, very interesting." I said, "No, it's more than interesting. It ruins your theory. Come on, it's more than interesting."
And what was his answer?
He had no explanation. He said, "There must be a reason for that, but I'll get back to you."
Right,
Of course, I didn't hear
exactly.
back from him.
Of course not, yes. So, and here is another thing that, Dave, we really need to talk about as far as evidence of the flood being 4,000 years, evidence of fossils being young and not millions of years old. And that is that over the last 10 years, they have been finding many dinosaurs and other animals that have got soft tissue within the crust of the dinosaur or animal bone. And it's not just soft tissue. They're finding collagen, they're finding red blood cells, they're finding DNA.
Yep.
And I don't know if you know this, Dave, or not, but anytime you have any kind of organic material, a carbon-based material, which would be anything alive, then it does not last millions of years. It cannot. It will break down into
Sure.
molecules
Of course.
long before that.
That's right.
There was a study done on the breakdown of collagen and DNA. And in both of those, they set up a model in which they extrapolated about how long it would take for that to start breaking down. And then they just extrapolated it out for how long it would take for it to disappear. And they did this with the parameters that it was in a perfect environment. In other words, pH level was perfect, heat was perfect, dryness was perfect, moisture was perfect.
Which never happens.
Which never happens, certainly not out in our climate anywhere around the world. And what they had done was they came up with collagen. Collagen is a tough, ropey protein that you find in bones. It helps keep the bones together. So the collagen survival rate at the max was 900,000 years. The DNA survival rate at the max was 650,000 years, okay? So even if you use these extrapolations, it still doesn't even equal up to 1 million years. How can dinosaur bones be 65 million years old?
They can't be.
They would have just totally disintegrated.
Right.
And you certainly wouldn't have any soft tissue in them. And it's not just that there's soft tissue in them, there's a lot of
Right.
soft tissue. We have a lot of animals.
That's right.
May I read this here?
Yes.
T-Rex, Triceratops, and Hadrosaur soft tissues have been found in Montana animals. We have dinosaur eggs that have soft tissue in them, the eggs themselves, in Argentina. We have an embryo sauropod, which is those long-necked dinosaurs, in South China. We have a hardware dinosaur in the Gobi Desert, soft tissue there. We have an Archaeopteryx, that is the bird that was found in Germany with soft tissue. Lizard species in Wyoming, and the Sisomorosaurus in New Mexico, Mosasaurus, like this that we held up, found in Kansas, and another one in Belgium, all having soft tissue. A scorpion in Pennsylvania, a scorpion. Now, a scorpion has got a lot softer internal organs than we do. And also, here's my favorite, tube worms. Tube worms have no collagen. They have no muscles in the sense like ours. They're very soft and squishy, like any worm, and yet we're finding in the fossil, inside we're finding soft tissue. So how can that survive millions of years?
Can't. Absolutely can't. They have no explanation, just like they have no evidence.
Yes.
Okay, so we have, the creationists have science. we have it wrapped up. There's no evidence for evolution, folks. And so we own the science. And we're happy about that. Now, what we're not happy about is that it's not getting to the kids in public school, because the evolutionists own the textbooks. And they tell the kids all the time throughout the unit on evolution that evolution in deep time, that's millions and billions of years, is a fact. Well, if you repeat it often enough, and they do, the kids believe it. Okay? Because there's nothing too absurd to be believed if it is repeated enough. And they repeat it all the time. So we have to wrap up soon. I want you to tell us about your books.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Yeah, so I'm very, very, very pleased that God had asked me to do this. And when I write these books, I do lift it up to prayer, because I want to do, I don't want to do anything that is not correct. These are historical Christian fictions, and it is very, very difficult to find any kind of history from time so far back as the Tower of Babel, which is where this series starts. And
What year are we talking about?
we're talking about 106 years after the flood.
Okay.
So that would have been 4,000 years ago, plus or minus maybe 400 years. So
Okay.
it could be a little longer or a little shorter.
Okay, and the flood was the year of the flood was 1,656 years after creation.
Yeah.
So it's about 120 years?
106 years.
106
It's
years
the
after-
Tower of Babel.
after the
Yes,
flood, okay.
yes, yes. So it would be the third generation. Is when the Tower of Babel happened during the third generation, post-flood generation. Mhm. And so, the first book is written where we have life as it is before the Tower of Babel. And it takes place with a young girl who lives on her father's olive orchard, and she is trying to find out who she is. And during all of that, the language changes. And her father had gone to go find Shem, and then she wanted to follow. Girls were not allowed to do that back then in my book. And so she came up with ways to do this. And during that time when she's out on her own, the language changes. So it's her survival in that and the exciting times that happens, and getting to meet Shem, which is Noah's middle son. That was an exciting thing to do that. Wouldn't you be excited to meet Noah's middle son? And then a little bit of the aftermath of that and how they survived it. The second book picks up 25 years later. So now we have about 31 years after the flood, 131. And it is with the heroine's little sister, now grown up. And by this time, this 25 years after the language was scrambled, people had begun to disperse, but they're not dispersing very far. That is evident from how we have historical records from back then. And the nations are just beginning to form, and so now there's getting to be these power plays, and what is happening is that evil has again reigned, and the Shoshana is the name of the younger sister that's now grown up and has children of her own, is captured by the evil king of Babylonia. And his name is Nimrod, and he is mentioned in the Bible, and they say he's the mighty hunter. But in historical records, I discovered that he's not just a hunter of wild beasts, he is also a hunter of men. And he has captured her to be the first human sacrifice. So,
okay, so these are novels, but they're based on some biblical realities and historical truth there that the Bible tells us about. After the flood, at the time of Babel. Now, just for those, to remind those about Babel, That was actually a tower that the men were making. And God says about these people at the time, they can do anything they set their minds to.
More than I could imagine.
Okay? So people were a lot smarter back then than they are now.
They were very smart back then.
They could do almost anything back then. They were building a tower to this guy. They wanted to maybe even be God. And so God had told them to disperse. They did not disperse. They stayed in that one location. And so that's why God scrambled their languages, and they had to disperse at that point.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Okay, and so the names of these and how can we get them?
The first book is called Of One Tongue, of course pertaining to the language that was spoken before the language split. And the second one is called The Golden Strand of Shinar, and the Shinar plain, of course, is where Babel was, and where the first Akkadians and Assyrians and Mitanni and all these different nations were beginning to form. And if you come to any of our creation seminars, I'm almost always there, and I sell my books there. And they are also available on Amazon, and they are available in book form, and they are also available as ebooks. The thing that I would like to point out about these books is because some of the things and events that have happened during those times were very remarkable. I didn't want people to think that I was making them up, so I also included in the back of the book an appendix. So every creation science concept that's there, like man living with dinosaurs, I don't want somebody to pick up the book and say, well, that's not right. They can go to the back of the book and see all sorts of evidence for why we know that man and dinosaur lived together, which of course had a different name back then, David. What was it called?
Dragons.
That's right, dragons. Now isn't that a fun thing? So, so that's included in my book. As a matter of fact, in the first book, there is an encounter with the owner of this claw, which was a thumb claw. And that was on a dinosaur that would get up to over 40 feet long called Baryonyx. But the Babylonian name of it was called an Azdaha.
Okay.
So exciting books. The third one's on its way. Hopefully a couple of months. I had hoped to get it out before Christmas, but I had some illnesses, medical issues that I had to deal with and wasn't able to. But.
Hey, and Willow, there's so much to talk about that we didn't get to today. And unfortunately, we have to close up now. So I want to bring you back, if that's okay.
Oh,
and
yes.
We'll get to the rest of it later on down the road. And I know that a lot of people will be very interested in tuning into that show.
Well, thank you. Yes. And we are going to cover some things like disharmonious fossils and even human fossils.
All right. We'll see you again later on down the road.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you, Dave.
And I do want to recommend these two books that Willow Dressel wrote, and the third one's coming out in the spring. And you can get them on Amazon, or you can come to the Creation Science seminars. Now, you're saying, how am I going to know about these seminars? This is how you do it. You tune into this show, we'll tell you about them, and you get on my email list by calling me. My number's on the screen. Call me and give me your email address. I'll get you on the notification list that I have for these seminars and our other creation events, trips to the Grand Canyon and such. So Willow Dressel, thank you for being my guest today and showing us these fossils.
Oh, you're very welcome, David. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.